Hey guys, welcome back to Micro Four Talks. It's a podcast about Micro Four Thirds, Lumix, full frame, videography, photography, and kind of just whatever I feel about, let's be honest. But today we're talking with Cesar and Matthew about Panasonic, Lumix, and just overall videography from 2023, a year in review. I know, very timely of me to review the last year in like the end of February, but guys, listen. We just pretend I got this like right at the end of the year and was on top of things. There's also going to be a part 2 to this with different guests, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by and enjoy this episode of Micro Four Talks. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of, I guess, this sort of podcast thing, Micro Four Talks. It's mostly about Lumix, Micro Four Thirds, and, sneaking in topics about filmmaking and things like that. And mostly just talking to people I want to talk to. Today we've got Matthew and Cesar on the line, and I think I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves for once, because, I think you'll do a better job than me, so... Matthew, how about you say hi to everybody first in case they don't know who you are?
Hello, my name is Matthew Dangyou. Similar to Rhett, I make a lot of content around and surrounding the Lumix community, talking a lot about the new S5 IIX, the G9 Mark II, and the GH6. I also run a video production company here locally in San Diego, California, called 4x3 Films, making product lifestyle videos.
Right on. And Cesar, how about yourself?
God, he's got that so polished. It sounds so nice.
I know.
What's going on, guys? My name is Cesar Lorca, and I'm based out of Miami, Florida. And my main job is basically working at a international fitness company. And we have an app, and I create all their media and campaigns. But outside of that, I like to do a lot of creative work, a lot of passion projects through YouTube. It's like my main source, basically, to be able to create stuff that I want to create when I'm feeling juicy, you know what I mean? So a lot of that stuff is around like Lumix cameras. It's like the main camera that I use to be able to create the stuff there, and I usually push a lot of Lumix through that. So that's the kind of stuff you can find there.
Right on. Man, I'm glad I don't have to introduce myself because I feel like you guys did such a better job than I would. So so that's lucky for me. But before we go any further, it's kind of a tradition here for me to ask two questions, which is how you guys originally got into filmmaking, because I don't know if even your audiences might know that. And, we'll start with there. So what was you guys' kind of introduction to filmmaking, and how did you guys know that you wanted to do this as, like, a full-time thing?
My story is a little wonky, because I got started when I was in college. I invented something for the bench press. So it's this thing that you clip onto the bench so you don't slide when you're actually bench pressing. And I couldn't afford a photographer at the time to be able to take pictures for every single time that I wanted to like push something out on Instagram or the website and everything. So I ended up picking up a camera and started taking pictures and creating the campaigns for it all by myself using a camera. And slowly I started falling in love more with the camera than the actual product that I was trying to sell. And I was like, I kind of like creating stuff like this. There's this like itch inside me that I just want to keep making more and more stuff like outside of what I'm doing right now. And it ended up just sticking. I had a Canon in the beginning, 70D is what I got. And then I started watching YouTube videos everywhere, and I was like, whoa, the GH5, the GH4, these cameras look amazing. And I started saving up, and I got a GH5, and the second I got that camera in my hands, I just started filming like crazy, like video. And people might hate me for this, but my comfort zone was photo when I first got that GH5, because video felt so damn hard, I'm not gonna lie to you. Because there's so many more ins and outs when it comes to video versus the singular moment kind of thing. But I'm so happy that I picked up that camera, the GH5, because that kind of started the whole journey into the filmmaking world for me.
For sure. And then You did answer my second question, which was how did you hear about Lumix and what was your first Lumix camera? So I guess we'll just combine those two questions for you, Matthew.
Cool. Yeah, well, that was actually kind of going to be integrated into my answer as well, ironically. But I started out in 2016 when I was still in high school. I wanted to basically be a YouTube vlogger, just similar like the Casey Neistat era. I grew up sort of in that earlier generation of YouTubers and kids that were started growing up watching YouTube and wanted to become a YouTuber. So I was watching Casey Neistat, and I was shooting on my dad's camera, which ironically also was a Nikon, though. I feel like every dad has a Nikon camera for some reason, but doesn't know how to use it. So then from there, I transitioned and I saved up, and I was debating to buy two cameras, either the Canon M50 or the G7. And I was watching a potato jet video at the time, which ended up making me decide to purchase the G7, which that was like all I could afford as a 16-year-old wanting a camera that shoots 4K. Granted, it was 8-bit, MP4, and it wasn't like a great Kodak whatsoever, but like that was my entry level into Lumix. And then from there, I just started continuing to wanting to like get more and more into filmmaking, and I was getting more passionate about that. And I was hugely in the music scene and was planning to go into a music career. Afterwards, it was going to be going into sound design, sound engineering, and producing. But there was two thoughts. A, I was going to a school with a tons of prodigies at the time, just absolutely extremely talented musicians. And I was like nowhere near their skill levels. So I was like, well, I ain't going to be playing music live, that's for sure. So I was like, all right, maybe I could do sound engineering. I was terrible at making music. I just like playing the drums. So I ended up pivoting and started pursuing filmmaking as a career, and then like wanting to own my own business, own my own video production company. I ended up buying the G9, which ended up kind of launching my channel talking about Lumix cameras, because I'm just absolutely passionate about like the techs and specs and just the intricate parts of all the cameras and how they work, how to rig them up and all of that. And then from there, that just journey continued on. I got hired at a video production company, learned tons of skills, bought the GH6, and then Lumix asked me to be one of their creators, part of their program, and ended up getting my hands on the S5 II and now the G9, and started my own video production company this last year called 4x3 Films.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it's been a big year for you, so congratulations on that. And I guess speaking of getting into the 2023 year in review kind of portion of the video, aka the main topic, what would you guys say would be like your workhorse camera? Because I know you guys have a few cameras and have gone through a bunch of cameras over the years, but yeah, camera and lens, what did the most work for you, YouTube or otherwise, in 2023?
Yeah, so for myself, starting the year, it was actually the GH6, and that was all on cinema lenses. And then once I got my hands on the S5 IIX, that just everything transitioned to full frame. I still own my entire Micro Four Third kit, but I tend not to pick it up and use it unless I need a second B cam. So my go-to camera right now is that S5 IIX, and the lens of choice I'm using is going to be the 24-70 Lumix lens, an f2.8. That's just kind of, I feel like, the does it all type of lens, and it makes it run and gun filmmaking extremely easy. I think I'm going to try to get my hands on this next year, some 7 Artisan primes, and hopefully that will be more the lenses I start using, just because they provide a higher quality look than the zoom lens does. But the zoom lens, you can't go wrong with that.
For sure.
Yeah. In the start of the year, I was using the S1H. It's been my workhorse for like three years, something around there. And the second I got my hands on the S5 IIX, I just started using that nonstop and just like collecting dust over there. But the S5 IIX with a 35 millimeters is like my main setup. Like I don't stop using that. I hardly even use my 24-70 anymore. I don't know if it's like laziness or I'm just comfortable with it, but I just find it so useful and it's just easy for me, especially for the type of look that I like to go for. But at least I'm using the 24-70 right now to film this, I don't feel as bad anymore.
I was gonna say that's kind of funny because I'm actually using the 35 millimeter to film this, but I usually use the 24-70, so we've kind of flipped there.
Yeah,
That's ironic. I slowly started using the 35 mil to film YouTube videos because it provides just a little bit more bokeh.
Yeah, and
Very
it's
juicy.
for me in my room. It's just like the perfect angle of view. Like 50 is a little too tight. 24, I feel like might show a little too much of my room. So I'm like, okay, 35 is actually kind of the perfect focal length for my space at least.
Unpopular opinion, my favorite focal length is 30 mil. Just gonna throw that out there.
Oh, okay. We got
Nice.
some hot takes coming in. I guess really quickly, my setup this year, it really has gone back and forth so much between the GH6 and the S5 II, just not the X version because I figured, if I want the high-end specs, I've got the GH6, right? But yeah, it seems like I just wake up every day and either feel like shooting full frame or feel like shooting Micro Four Thirds, and I don't know necessarily always have a rhyme or reason for it. It just is what it is. Both I think have their strengths and weaknesses, but that's a topic for a different day, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. I feel like Micro Four Third product videos, I will always tend to like, if anything with macro details and I need a lot of light, Micro Four Third makes so much sense in that category.
So back to 2023, how do you guys think Lumix did in 2023, like in terms of like changing their brand and image with all the new phase detect stuff? They released a few cameras, S5 II, S5 IIX, G9 II. So it's been a pretty big year for cameras, not so much for lenses, but we'll talk about those a little bit as well. So just in terms of the overall, do you guys have any comments on any of those cameras? I guess we'll start with like the full frame series. How do you think the S5 II and S5 IIX were received? And I guess, how do you feel about that strategy of like two very similar bodies and what that might look like going forward for them?
I think it was honestly like really cool to see them push the finally getting phase detect in the camera. I definitely feel like when they announced the phase detect in the full frame and then also the phase detect in the Micro Four Thirds, it just kind of like made probably a ton of GH6 users who just bought the camera the year before just be like, bro, you couldn't put this in this camera too. But with that said, I also find it like really fascinating, like that they did release both those cameras, the S5 II and the 2X. The only thing that was interesting is like it's only that $200 difference to get like basically all the upgrades that comes with the X. But if you end up buying the S5 II, I believe you can spend $200 and get it basically converted to be an S5 IIX minus the internal Apple ProRes, which was kind of that interesting thing. It's like, oh, well, why are we spending like $200 extra dollars? It's either spending it now or later or just not at all. I think it's an unpopular opinion. I preferred the S5 II look just because I really like red and black and I just think that looks like a super clean look. So I prefer the look of the S5 II over the 2X. I do like the blacked out like text and stuff, but I really like that red ring. I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts that like Lumix did so many things this year finally. Like I feel like this, like from December to now, of not like December of 2022 to now, they started like doing the Japan trip, the Shutter Showdown, the Lumix Creators Group finally started and events start happening. I think this is like the biggest year that Lumix is starting to invest into creators, and they're doing it in such a way that is not similar to what other brands like Sony and Canon are doing, but they're doing it in their kind of own unique style and way. Because I feel like the Lumix community is like this secret, tight-knit niche community. Like once you get in, you're just like, oh, I understand the hype of Lumix cameras now. But like from an outsider perspective, everyone's like, what is Lumix? And it's just like, I think it's like everyone that shoots Lumix is trying to let other people know what Lumix is. So it's cool to finally see them invest into creators, I feel like.
No, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's my favorite part about Lumix actually, as of the last year, that they've actually turned around and actually care about the creators, because I hardly see any other brand, like camera brand, actually investing into their creators and the people who actually use their cameras. So it feels really good to be a voice out there trying to like push out their cameras, especially I think we could all agree that if you started with like the early Lumix cameras and you wanted autofocus and stuff like that was one of the most grueling things that you had to like get through in the beginning, you know. But we stood here as like believers, you know. You're like, one day. And as for the S5 II and S5 IIX thing, I don't know. I thought it was kind of an odd move to have both those cameras, especially with what Matthew said, that with the little $200 upgrade. I feel like there should have just been like one option, especially. But I guess it's I don't know. I'm more of a video shooter, so all the S5 IIX specs were always going to be interesting to me more. You know what I mean? So
I'm curious, Cesar, would you want, say the S5 IIX didn't have 4K crop 60p and it was like a little bit more, not as many like crops, videos like 48 and 60p isn't cropped, would that make the $200 to $300 difference between the cameras feel more worth it?
I think so, right? Because I don't know.
Because I feel like if they made that like basically not, because the major difference is external RAW, which obviously is a $200 upgrade, and Apple ProRes internally, which is like two features that only a select few of people are going to be using on these type of cameras at this price point. If people are wanting to shoot RAW, they're most likely not going to be picking up a $2,000 camera unless they need a B camera, which then that makes sense. But I feel like if they just added a couple more features to make the S5 IIX just feel even more premium, I feel like that would have made the difference between the two cameras like more significant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially, do you shoot RAW often?
No,
Yeah,
I don't shoot RAW at all.
I haven't used the RAW a single time, if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah, it's just RAW is such an investment in terms of like there's so much extra things to think about. Like I was shooting in this music video in December, and I was talking to Blackmagic about using B-RAW at least for this project, but we were shooting on an anamorphic, and just one thing after another came up. I'm like, oh, the HDMI delay. Oh, am I gonna send it to the RAW recorder and then out to my focus puller? What's that gonna do for the stretch factor, and what's that going to do for the delay for the focus puller and all this stuff? So it's just like every time I went to choose RAW, it's been like a situation where it's just like there's just so many little downsides, and at the end of the day it's not going to be a difference that's going to show up on screen for like 99% of people. So that's a tough call for me usually.
Right. I feel like it would even be cool if there was like an app that Lumix made that allowed you to convert your footage if you needed to convert it, and not necessarily in the editing program. Because for me, the only time I would really want RAW is if I want to change my white balance settings in post, but probably 9 out of 10 times, I feel like if you're a filmmaker, unless you're in absolute rush, you should be making your shot look how you want it to look in post, basically inside the camera first. I mean, like for myself, like I will customize the colors, and like if I know what LUT I'm using on the camera itself. So like right now I'm using my own like Dangyou classic teal and orange LUT. I will customize my white balance settings to make it look perfect. So then in post, I basically just need to do a paste setting on my LUT, and it will be basically done.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing where it's like you actually see that a lot of times, even on high-end productions and Hollywood films, where it's like the DP will have a production LUT most of the time going into a shoot of like how this is going to look, and they're going to get a lot of this stuff right. Even if they do shoot RAW, why? I don't know. It just, and I always say that too. It's just like I know how to white balance, so like RAW doesn't really have that benefit to me, especially with like the huge storage requirements. So it's interesting we're all on the same page about that. I definitely want to try it out soon for sure, and I definitely want to try B-RAW and Apple ProRes RAW, but it's just what's the right project to do that with is the question for me. But anyway, back to Lumix. So I actually forgot about this lens for just a minute. And Lumix also released that 14 to 28 f4 to 5.6 wide angle zoom, and I think that's the only lens for full frame they released in 2023. Have you guys had a chance to mess with that, or what did you guys think about that when it came out?
Not gonna even lie. Didn't know they had a 14 to 28. Was it 14 28 or 16 to 20?
So they've got the 16 to 35 that's been out for a while. That's like a f4, I think. And then it just kind of sneakily got released, I think, at the same time as the S5 II, this like 14 to 28 with the variable aperture. And so I feel like it got overshadowed a little bit. So,
Well, I haven't heard about it even, so.
Yeah, me neither.
well, there we go. So yeah, I think it's an interesting lens because it's really small and it has really close focus. But I don't know. I always prefer a constant aperture, and I don't really care about lens size, to be honest. I don't know about you guys, but like
Right.
if it does the job, I'll carry it around within reason. You know, like the 24 to 70 is huge, but I still
Right.
use it all the time.
I think that's my hot take. Like, I made a video on the S5 IIX, basically, and I was complaining. One of my only complaints on there was that, in my opinion, it's too light. Like, I don't, I like to like rig out my camera so like they're heavy, you know, and I don't care if the lens is freaking 3 pounds, and you know, like, like the heavier the camera is, the more comfortable it is in my hand. And I had so many people in the comment section being like, "Oh, I like that it's light," and I'm like, I know, I said it's my personal preference, but dude,
You're a bodybuilder, bro.
no, dude, the only thing I'm lifting
Bro,
is
I've seen your
burgers to my
Instagram.
face. Dude, that was like 8 years ago. But whatever.
I saw those flex posts.
Those were the golden days. We don't talk about that anymore.
I'll have to put some screenshots up of that.
Oh
Perfect.
God. Gymshark, sponsor me, please. But yeah, I don't know, man. I agree with you with the weight of the lens. Like, if it's heavy, if it's I don't mind, as long as it's pretty, it looks good, you know? That's all that matters to me.
Yeah, I feel like with lenses, especially for the Lumix, the only time I really care if, like, the weight of the lens or the weight of the entire thing is when I'm doing like any type of travel filmmaking. Like if I'm doing like a 8-mile hike, I end up grabbing the G9 Mark II and grabbing like the 12 to 60 and call it a day, because I'm like, I am not carrying this giant camera, like, in those situations. But any situations where I'm actually creating like a filmmaking project, whatever, you know, pit whatever lens, pit the heaviest lens. I don't really care, because it's not like I'm going to be doing, like, I don't shoot weddings anymore. Maybe I would care more if I shot any weddings, but I did like 2 weddings and I'm like, yeah, this ain't for me. I ran the other way. I was like, I'm done. I did my passing of like the filmmaking passing, right? I feel like that most filmmakers go through, but like I'm done. But I would say it was really cool, like with that 100mm lens that they just released and having that entire 6 lens prime setup. It's cool that finally the full frame systems at least all have like prime lenses that are the exact same size and sort of close to each other's weight, which I feel like is something really cool and not a lot of companies do. I know a lot of cinema lenses have that where it's the same size and weight, but like the Micro Four Third prime lenses were all over the place in size and dimensions and like how they looked. And it's cool that finally they are getting it right with the full frame system on that like 6 lens prime like setup.
And that was one of the things that I always talked about in the past, was like, Panasonic is such a video forward company, at least like from people's perspective, that I always wondered, like, especially back in like GH5 days and things like that, like where are these like more dedicated video lenses that could still be great for photos as well. And on Micro Four Thirds, eventually we got like the 10 to 25 and the 25 to 50, which had a clickless aperture and the clutch focus for the closest thing to like true manual focus, until they had the linear focus updates on a lot of the cameras. And now with the S series, they've got a few clutches like with a 24 to 70, but then you've got this like matching pseudo cinema lens setup. Like you said, it's taking notes from the cinema world anyway, and just like, I mean, I don't think people, maybe they do, but some people I think don't appreciate how helpful like every lens having a similar or the same filter thread is when you're out and about, because like messing with step up rings when you're in the middle of a shoot is like the worst thing ever. So I'm glad that they have fixed the autofocus and like got the phase detect in there for sure, because now they have some of the best autofocus, and I still think they probably have some of the best manual focus, both in terms of the tools to manual focus, but also things like I said, like the clutch focuses and the linear motors and a lot of their lenses. So
Can't you set your AB on Lumix cameras too?
yeah, you can have like a focus range. You can set the degrees of the linear turn. They give you, and then of course there's like the punch in and the focus peaking and things like that. That I don't know. I just really appreciate that they have probably the best manual focus experience, which makes sense given no phase detect until recently, and then now they have some of the best autofocus. So I think you could reasonably do either, like pretty much better than any other camera manufacturer that I know of, because I think everybody's still linear focus on almost every lens they've got.
Right. I feel like Lumix, just because they had such terrible autofocus and it kind of like bit them in the butt like initially, since they moved so far forward in like features and the cameras are so feature rich now that they have face detect, it's like I feel like all these other cameras are like, okay, we need to get like my shutter angle and like get I was gonna say false colors. I would love to have false colors in Lumix cameras.
Fingers
That'd
crossed.
be so nice. But like they have all these features that are in this camera that like make it feel like a more professional cinema camera, in a sense that like when you switch to a cinema camera, like it feels a little bit similar when you're shooting on like a red, for example. Obviously it's a lot different, like there's no IBIS or there's no stabilization, which that can throw a lot of people and a lot of filmmakers off potentially, but it's still really nice that like they are just such featured rich cameras. I'm just like starting to hope that going forward they're gonna catch up with the basic required specs, I would say, for like most industry standard like things you need to film,
No, for sure. Yeah, it's
at least
it'll
on the
be
full frame
interesting.
side.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Speaking of not full frame, the G9 II also came out this year, and how did you guys feel that release went compared to the S5 II and S5 IIX? Was it better just to release the one body? What do you guys think about the shared body between the S5 II and the G9 II? Yeah, I just want to know what the, I guess, like message or reason behind the G9 II existing was from your standpoint for Lumix.
Dude, I didn't get one. I haven't used it, so I really don't have any input for that. But I've seen what people have been creating with it, and it's just everything looks fantastic. That's more of like a photo centric camera, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I ended up grabbing and I got one for them to utilize. It's basically the GH6 in an S5 II body with a micro four thirds sensor and face detect. That's basically that camera completely summed up right there. With the release of it though, like the S5 II and the S5 IIX was so hyped up, and it was like, I think that release was a lot better in terms of just the scale of it. But like the G9 Mark II, it kind of just got announced, and then it's like only a very small handful of creators had the camera in their hands. And I don't know if that's because of development reasons or if they had like a certain amount of sample cameras at the time. But a lot of people didn't have it on its hands until like much later after it got announced. Feel like in that scenario, give the camera to a bunch of creators beforehand, maybe announce like new camera coming, G series. I know they did some promotional videos, but not a ton. It was just kind of happened like that, it felt like. And then on the day of like November, make the embargo go off and be like, all right, the camera's out, you can purchase it right now. I feel like a lot of people these days are trying to make decisions that are instantly, and I feel like when they make a decision that they are able to be like, oh my gosh, this camera's great, let me go purchase it right now, that like click to buy purchase like rate will go way higher, just because like they're able to receive the camera within, you know, whatever, a couple days with Amazon and B&H, versus like the camera's announced and then you have to wait like 3 to 4 months before you can actually buy it. And then also, since I feel like they wanted that like 2 different cameras, because they are the official pickleball camera brand sponsor of 2024, which is kind of interesting and weird, but it's cool. I like it. Since they sponsored the PP, I feel like just having 2 cameras, being like, here's 2 different camera systems, like for 2 different levels, even though they're more premium end, I would say it wouldn't be like, I feel like these are 2 cameras. This isn't going to be someone's first camera purchase. You know, like someone's first camera purchase probably isn't going to be a $2,000 camera. That's like the realistic.
Yeah, I think that's like the toughest spot that Lumix is in right now, is that they have, well, so it's so weird because like Lumix is almost entirely like medium end cameras, you know, like they don't have a super, like I forget how expensive cameras are sometimes, because like Lumix cameras barely get over the $2,000 mark, but you get like $4,000 or $5,000+ for some of the high end Sony and Canon stuff, which always surprises me when I look. And so, but Canon and Sony also have pretty low end cameras that you can get for like closer to $1,000, like some of the A6000 series, or you know, some of the APS-C cameras that they're releasing. So I guess this is going into predictions and wish list a little bit, but it might work out for them. And I think I've heard rumors that maybe there's an S series, budget S series camera coming, or a more budget Micro Four Thirds camera coming. But I don't know. What do you guys, I guess, think about just like that fact that like almost all of Lumix's cameras have been between like $1,800 and $2,300 for quite a while at this point?
Actually, I love that they make filmmaking basically accessible with the cameras that have so many features. Like, I think Lumix is a great brand to hop into if you want to be spoiled, you know what I mean? When it comes to that, like the color, the specs, like all the tools we get inside, I think it's just like the perfect price point for what you get. Especially if it's competing with like the other camera brands and their features, I feel like Lumix has that on lock, especially with the pricing. Like, I've seen so much footage on like the other cameras basically, and I think dude, it's just like the price is just on the name now. Like every camera is so good now that Lumix just has that sweet spot for everything that you get. And even like the S1H right now, like I go back sometimes and I try to color grade the footage that I had from the past versus what I have now, and I'm not sure if they changed like the color science and into the S5 IIX. I don't know if you guys know that, but the flexibility in the color, for me, color is like everything. I care too much about it. I almost spent some time color grading more than I do editing. Like I color grade before I even edit a video. Like that's how much I like it. And the flexibility that I get in the S5 IIX is just, I don't know, man. It's just like so easy. The highlight recovery is insane, and it's put my S1H footage to shame, in my opinion. So seeing like all these features basically in these cameras at that price range, and it's just worth it. I don't know.
I feel like Lumix needs to kind of like stick to their guns, which is currently right now they'll release a camera, and within that budget range that they're in, they're trying to like not hold back any punches with being like a reasonable like respect. Like, you know, a $2,000 like the S5 IIX being around $2,000, having all the features that's in the camera make total sense, and they feel like they even went above and beyond on this camera. Same with the G9 Mark II, that price range, even though it's a little bit steep on the Micro Four Thirds for some people, it still makes sense based on what is everything is in the camera. I feel like though the one downside to it, since they don't hold back any punches, they don't have any really entry level cameras that are like more updated. And I don't think that's a firmware update with their old cameras, because I think Lumix is also really, really good at firmware updating their cameras. And like, I remember when they firmware updated the G9 and then it suddenly got 4K, 24 and 30 frames a second and 10-bit. And it's like, wow, this like 4-year-old camera basically just became a brand new camera. And that's what Lumix has been known for. With that said, though, I feel like they just need a new series, like you said, Rhett, to just have be like a new full frame series or a new Micro Four Thirds series to be that entry level camera point where it's that it's that $500 to $1,000 range, and just something to get people hyped up and interested in Lumix, and not for the people that are going to be interested in wanting the best specs. They release the camera and then they're like, all right, the next camera's got to be better than the last camera. And it's the same thing again and again and again. Meanwhile, companies like Sony has like, I think it's like the Sony A600 or something like that, the A600, is that right?
Yeah, there's so many of those. There's like
right.
600, 6700, 6800. I'm like, oh, I can't keep track of them, which is
right.
like a huge thing for me.
Exactly. I think that's overdoing it, what Sony's doing. But the only advantage is like, say you got that high schooler like myself, they're looking at cameras. All right, what cameras do I want to get? Well, Sony's releasing a ton of like entry level cameras. They don't have the greatest specs out there. They don't have the greatest features, but they have like the basic bones of like instructions of like what makes that camera good. So it's like if Lumix released a camera for that entry level filmmaker, for the high schooler, that has basically the basic bones and structures of what makes a Lumix camera awesome and amazing. Maybe that's like, I don't think that's going to be vlog, but that'll be like, you know, maybe it has shutter angle, maybe it has 4K 60 frames a second. It's in the Micro Four Third camera, it has phase detect, and it has just these cool, great settings, but it's not like jam-packed, everything's in it, and it's at that $500 to $1,000 price point. Then when they're like, all right, now I'm into filmmaking, I want a better camera, and like, now I'm willing to spend $2,000 to $3,000 on a camera. Now the S5 2X makes sense.
I have to say, like, going back slightly, I do super appreciate, like, I know people get upset sometimes with like the G9 release because they're like, it just does everything the GH6 does, but it has phase detect basically. And it's like, one, that's not quite true, but two, it's like, for me, Panasonic, like you said, has always put basically everything they possibly can into their cameras, and if it's not in their cameras, they are probably going to update it to have it later. And I've never got that sense, except maybe a few times over like the entire like years I've, you know, had Lumix cameras, where I felt them like holding something back or getting like the you know, the Canon crippling going on that everyone always talks about from the past, you know. So like, I appreciate that they're always trying to push things forward and put as much into the cameras as possible. Like, I always talk about how the G100 had like live view composite and vlog and all these like crazy features that did not belong on like a super tiny vlogging camera. But yeah, I do think that something like the G100, or like maybe this might be one of the best-selling Lumix cameras of all time, like the G7. People are still buying the G7 from like Best Buy, and it's like from the GH4 days, and people still see it and pick it up. And so Who knows? Maybe a G7 Mark II, or like you know, something like that for the full frame cameras would work. You know, don't even, you know, just a camera with phase detect that's a lower budget, you know. Like, I think a G7 Mark II would kind of go insane, to be honest with you.
But yeah, imagine there's a $500 camera like in that full frame lens series that has phase detect. It has maybe 4K and 30 frames a second and 10-bit, and then maybe has a cropped 4K, not 10-bit, maybe 8-bit, and like they released that as the entry level camera. Holy shoot, that's like an amazing entry level camera, even at that $500 to $1,000 price point.
Well, some free notes for Lumix there. I think we're onto something, though. I think definitely, and especially too, because like if you look at Sony too, like their whole strategy is cheap-ish entry-level cameras and kind of expensive lenses. And Lumix lenses aren't crazy, but you know, you can definitely get a lot out of a cheaper camera body and a more expensive lens, both on the full frame side and on the Micro Four Thirds side for sure.
Yeah, I will say I'm grateful for Lumix to firmware update their cameras, because like I see how many Sony cameras are getting released, which is basically, oh, I just bought this camera, but now what I want in the update and firmware update to fix this camera is in a new body for basically a couple extra $100. So basically maybe like another $2,000 I would have to spend basically to get your firmware update. Versus Lumix is like, all right, you want your firmware update to make this camera basically feel like a brand new camera? Here you go. Here's the firmware update. Like with the G9 Mark II, now that it can shoot HDMI raw output when it wasn't originally able to. Instant firmware update, and that made that camera be on the same level as GH6.
Yeah, that really surprised me. I remember I predicted, I was like, if anything, the G9 II won't do the raw over HDMI and all that stuff to kind of protect the GH6 lineup. But right. I think I was like conditioned by other camera companies. I'm like, oh yeah, Lumix doesn't really do that. Like if it's like possible, they're gonna do it. And
right.
And the GH6 is even getting firmware updates still this year. Had some pretty notable firmware updates and things like that. So they're still updating the GH6, and it hasn't got as many firmware updates as like the GH5 did back in the day, but I think it's a more complete camera right out of the box, so it didn't really need a whole lot of stuff. Although I still would love if it had the live LUT feature, but you know, that's a different conversation. Awesome. And so how do you guys think the Micro Four Thirds and full frame lens lineup is going? You know, we had technically the 9mm for Micro Four Thirds got released in 2022, but I feel like it was like way late in the year. And this new 100mm macro just got released in 2024. We touched on that earlier. But like, how do you guys think the lens lineup is for people coming in? Because, you know, we still get people having comments of like the L mount is incomplete or doesn't have certain lenses or whatever. And I don't know. I just feel like that hasn't been true for a while.
I think we have a complete set, honestly. Because if you look at the primes, like you're covered from end to end now. So, and I don't know. I feel like you could start getting a little nitpicky. You know what I mean? But I honestly think the L mount alliance thing is like, I don't think people really see the full potential in that with all the glass that we have access to and that we could use, and it's all super high end. Like if you're expecting to get a crisp image, a beautiful image, you're gonna get it with these lenses. And I was looking into getting the 50mm through Sigma, and after using it at the Lumix retreat from, I think I used Anson's, and I was like looking at it, I was like, damn, I might just get this, and it's so affordable, and it's not gonna break the bank, you know. You could get a full prime set, it's not like you're buying cinema glass, you know. You're not gonna go broke.
Right. I feel like with Lumix cameras, the L mount and the Micro Four Third mount can be converted to basically everything. And it's kind of like comes to the point where it's like, all right, you get these cameras and you can get whatever converter you want, and you can just buy one lens. Like if you get PL, I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on this. I don't know if there is the Micro Four Third to PL converter, but I feel like there would be. But even if, say, you get EF, I know that one, you can get a Micro Four Third to EF, and then you can also get a L mount to EF adapter, and basically have the same lenses that you're using on your Micro Four Third cameras and your full frame cameras, which is really cool. And I don't feel like it's as easy to do that between other camera brands and systems. Like, it's just one of those things where I like absolutely love the L mount and love the Micro Four Third mount because it could be so utilized. And it's like Cesar said, it's like I'm planning to get budget cinema lenses for the L mount, and they look absolutely amazing, and they're not going to be breaking the bank either. They're going to be like $400 cinema lenses.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, you know, like you said, people can nitpick and be like, you know, where's my 135mm and the L mount and all that stuff, but I do think what they're doing in terms of lens design is really impressive. I love that their zoom lenses are basically parfocal, so you don't have to worry about that like horrible shifting you used to see on like the first like electronic lenses from all these different companies. And I think Fuji might be the worst for this. I see some reviews of them and they just shift the exposure and the focus plane like as you zoom, like in a super distracting way. And if you want to do a nice slow zoom with like the 24 to 105 or something, like you can, and the focus is not going to really shift on you. Things like the focus breathing compensation being done optically in Lumix lenses, you know, I see like Sony getting like focus breathing compensation digitally in their cameras, and it just is like, it seems like they're going so far out of their way to like not design lenses for video that I just really appreciate all the design decisions going into especially like the full frame glass. But even like, again, my favorite Micro Four Thirds lenses, the 10 to 25 and 25 to 50, have super low focus breathing, and again, that's all optically corrected, which is why I think the 24 to 70, for example, is a little bit bigger than your average 24 to 70. But I think some of the design choices were worth the bigger size, like we talked about earlier. So yeah, I think they had a lot more clear vision for the full frame lenses, and I guess I hope that maybe we get some updated Micro Four Thirds lenses to kind of mirror that with maybe some of their prime lenses.
I love on the 24 to 70, it's like a small little feature, but how you can like, you pop the focus ring back and it stops.
That is really nice.
Nano mode. That is so intuitive and such an easy thing to do that I think it's often overlooked. But
unrelated question, Cesar, what are you wearing right now?
I'm wearing a black long sleeve that says "Good times, bad friends."
Okay, cool. I didn't know if you were gonna pull the move that I pulled. I threw on the Lumix hoodie, so I didn't know if we were about to both be matching right now.
Oh, dude, you should have told me. That would have been hilarious. Hold on,
Well, see, then I wouldn't have matched, so that would not have worked out at all. So
no, just edit it in.
Thank God we didn't do that. So this might be a brief conversation, but this is a Micro Four Thirds podcast at the end of the day. What do you guys think about what's going on with Olympus or OM, I guess, these days? Are you guys aware of them at all? Do you have any thoughts about how they've been doing in the last year or two? And I'll leave that one open to you guys.
Not gonna even lie, I didn't know they were still around.
No.
me neither, bro.
Yeah,
I'm in the Lumix echo chamber.
Yep. They're still going. I think both of these cameras were 2022, but they released the OM1 and an OM5, which was like a budget version. But yeah, they are super. I feel like Olympus, even more than like the G9 II, is like just has such an air of like, this is a photo camera that you guys, as like very video first people, probably wouldn't have even like paid attention to that stuff. And I don't think they've really released anything in 2023, so they might not even belong in this conversation, but I had to bring it up. I just wanted to see what you guys were gonna say.
Right. I feel like when you ask the question like, what cameras or camera brands have a Micro Four Thirds sensor, to just a general filmmaker who doesn't shoot on Micro Four Thirds cameras, they're gonna probably say Lumix and then the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera, and that's about it.
Yep, I think unfortunately that is kind of true. Although some people might be like, "Oh, doesn't Olympus?" I think people know Olympus more for their lenses than their cameras at this point for Micro Four Thirds, because they'll still pick up, and some people still prefer some of the Olympus lenses. And it's actually kind of funny how, this was very sad for Olympus, but a lot of people tried Olympus lenses on the new G9 Mark II, and they're like, the autofocus on Olympus lenses works better on the G9 II than it does on like the OM1. And I'm like, oh, that's a tough one. Quickly to round out this 2023 video, I'm going to have you guys shout out your channels one more time and have people kind of tell people what your channel's about really quickly. So Matthew, I guess I'll have you go first.
Cool. So if you want to check out any of my content, it's basically just Matthew Dangyou, kind of like Dangyou smell. everywhere on YouTube, on Instagram, and everything. I create a lot of content surrounding, again, just talking about Lumix camera. So if you want to learn about the S5 IIX, the G9 Mark II, or the GH6, which new video GH6 versus the G9 Mark II coming out very soon, you can check that out on my channel.
And before we move on to you, Cesar, do you have a favorite video from 2023, Matthew, or a video people should maybe start on if they haven't stopped by your channel before? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here.
No,
but,
you're good. I think I have the video in mind. So I created one video this year that I feel like is the best introduction to my channel, which is why I recommend Lumix over Sony and Canon. I feel like that's the best introduction video that you can watch on my channel. If you go to most popular, it's probably up there.
Awesome. I'm planning on stealing that video idea soon, but I will shout you out.
I
on
literally
inspiring me.
stole it from someone else, so you should probably take it from, who did I rob that from? Oh, why can't I think of their name? Cesar, you know who they are. Big beard. Dustin.
Dustin.
Yeah, I totally definitely took the idea from Dustin.
Okay, well, we'll link Dustin's video instead of yours now. That's your... No, I'm just kidding. We'll put them both down there. So, and then, yeah, Cesar, same question to you. Shout out your channel, and then maybe recommend people a good first video, or maybe your favorite video from the last year or so.
Okay. My channel is Cesar Lorca _. You can just search up Cesar Lorca, and it should pop up on YouTube. And my channel is basically all things creativity, anything to help filmmakers make decisions on what products to get, and overall just creativity. And I think the best video as an introduction would be every filmmaker needs this cheap vintage lens. I shot the entire thing on a 50mm FD on the S5 IIX, and I take you through a story on why you should get some vintage lenses and the characteristics that it brings. So they're affordable, and I love that story. You get to see a little bit of the behind the scenes of some travel and stuff, so I feel like you'll enjoy that one.
I'll shout out Cesar too. You definitely should subscribe to him. This guy's about to blow up.
Appreciate you, bro.
No, I think I really love the style of your videos, and I've been going through the backlog a little bit, and you know, the vibes are definitely super cool, and I like that it's not hyper focused on Lumix, and you will get other filmmaking and little bits of advice on both of you guys' channel that I think goes beyond any specific, you know, camera brand or company. So, and of course, just because I got to get myself in there a little bit, I think some of my favorite videos I made this year were like testing cameras, which I'm not good at and don't know how to do, but I still do my best. And so my GH6 ISO video or comparing the GH6 to the GH5S are probably some of the two favorite videos I did last year. They were a lot of work, but I feel like sometimes the videos that have a lot of work pay off, and sometimes they don't. So it is what it is.
That's the gamble.
So, do you guys have any specific predictions for what Lumix might do in 2024? Not what you want them to do, but what do you think, especially with you guys talking to people in Lumix a little bit? Obviously, we don't want you to break any NDAs or anything like that if you've got some tidbits, but just in terms of the general direction of the company, what do you think they're going to be doing in terms of releases? Or what's like the image they're trying to put out there with Lumix cameras going forward in 2024?
Cesar?
Matthew?
Cesar?
Matthew?
Cesar?
All right, I'll take it.
Cool.
I think they're going more towards over the last year they've been going very creator centric and paying attention to everybody who uses their cameras. So I think we might see some more entry level cameras like we spoke about in the last podcast, and that's where the competition's going, and I believe that's where they're going to go too. But I also believe that we might be seeing some maybe higher end cameras. I think like we might get a S2H. I think maybe I'm crossing my fingers. I watched this guy's YouTube video that he was like going through patents and things online and everything, and he was predicting a new S2H line. So hopefully we get something there, and hopefully has internal NDs. Lumix, please, internal NDs. But
I did a video on that. I found that article and I was like, oh, I have to talk about this because I've been saying for at least since before the GH6, like, take out the shutter, we don't really need it, and just put in some kind of ND system. And I feel like there might be just enough room for that, but we'll see what camera that ends up being in. But S1H2 or S2H seems to be the right way to go.
So I feel like, just in terms of based off like what they've done in the history, Lumix has like not even touching point like on the entry level camera system, because I have not a clue on what they're going to be doing in that category. But something that is you can sort of notice, at least from the GH6, it's always been a Micro Four Third camera, the full frame camera, a Micro Four Third camera, and then the next one theoretically would be a full frame camera released. But I don't feel like a camera, even though I want a camera to be released this year, and maybe I'm 100% wrong. I would love to be wrong, and I would love if they release the S2H this year. That'd be great. I just don't feel like a camera is gonna get released this year. I think they're gonna like try to stay on the hype of the S5 II and the G9 II, but I do feel like in 2024, Lumix will still continue to improve on and just make the creator community just having a couple more events, or maybe at least one big event, another Shutter Showdown. I feel like they're going to focus more on the creators this year again. I will say, I can't remember it, and Cesar, maybe you remember it. What was the other full frame camera from Lumix? The S1?
S1.
Or S1R?
I think those are two different cameras, but yeah, those are both.
Yes.
Full frame.
Yeah.
Full frames. So I think that's the next lineup before the S1 H Mark II or the S2H. Unfortunately, I would prefer the S2H, and I feel like a lot of people. I really love the S2H because the S2H is like the exact same body style, I believe, as the GH6, and that's basically what I want in a full frame camera. Is the full frame camera, but GH6 with face detect.
Yeah. And the S1H is huge. If you haven't ever held one, like it's impressively large, and it really just is like a GH6, but just like expanded in every direction. It feels like so. It's a pretty significant camera, but it has the same tilty flippy screen, and yeah, I see people saying stuff like this a lot, where it's like, I want the G9 II, but in the GH6 body, or I want the S5 IIX in the S1H body, and so I'm sure they're aware of that, but I think Panasonic very rarely releases like a flagship or like a top end model without bringing some serious changes to it. That's why the G9 II is just the GH6 with phase detect. They're not saying this is like the flagship of all flagships, like the GH line. Just like they're not saying that the S5 IIX is like the flagship of all flagships, because, you could argue it's just the S5 II with phase detect, which saying just in there probably is like underselling how important phase detect is. But if they're going to put out a GH7 with phase detect or an S2H, it would make sense if they wanted to put that out as soon as possible. But at the same time, they're not really a company to like rush these releases either. So I could see it going either way depending on what their strategy is, for sure.
Question: do you think if they drop the S2H, do you think it'd be a box camera or the classic body that the S1H has?
I think they would have two options, one being the box camera and one being the classic body style. But then again, it would be nice if they did make it like that, maybe that middle ground where it's kind of like the FX3, but in the S2H, where it's kind of that flat box style, but it's not completely a box and still has that tilt up screen, the flip out screen. So it can still be utilized as like a YouTube camera in a sense, where you can have the camera be flipped towards you, but it can also still be in that box-ish style where it's like no viewfinder.
I actually I might be wrong about this, but I kind of remember seeing a article where because like Lumix and Panasonic, the broadcast department has always been kind of separate, even though they work together a lot. You know, because like Vlog comes from, like, the V stands for Varicam, which is from the broadcast cinema line. And I don't know how much you guys go into the cinema line, especially with Panasonic, but it's been pretty quiet for a while. And I think I saw an article recently where the broadcast division and Lumix are getting combined. So I'm wondering if we're going to see more of a less boxy style camera and an actual true cinema camera in the ballpark of those Sony cameras, or even like the Varicam or the Eva 1 from back in the day. So, because I think the box cameras are just a little too limited out of the box, no pun intended, for a lot of creators. And some of these like FX series cameras are super popular. So I think it could make a lot of sense if they went in more of a cinema line direction. But that's also a lot of research and development. So we'll see.
Yeah. The Eva 1 was the last style like that they dropped, right?
I think so, yeah. Like, they had the Varicam Pure, which is still being used. Like, they shot Better Call Saul on that. They shot Master of None. I know Crazy Rich Asians is probably like the last super successful film I saw shot on the Varicam Pure. And then the Eva 1 was like the APS-C kind of more budget cinema camera, which I know a lot of people loved and are still asking for a new version of it. But yeah, I don't know.
Now, Cesar, I would ask you this question. If they made it into a box camera, say the S2H style specs, where it has like basically the GH6 specs but in full frame with face detect, if it was in a box style, would you want IBIS?
If I'm being 100% honest, when I run and gun as of late, the last 4 months, I've been taking off the IBIS, especially if I'm doing like running, chasing an athlete, or doing some quick motion. I've been actually taking it off, and I like the look a lot more than I do when it has the IBIS on. I don't know. So I think I wouldn't want the IBIS in it.
Interesting, because I feel like that's like a divided group, and like I gave them a recommendation on how it could work. Again, with zero engineering background whatsoever, but I thought some system that they can like physically lock the sensor instead of turning off the IBIS, where it physically locks the sensor so the sensor can't move whatsoever in the camera, and it's not electronic, it's like a physical locking mechanism. So it's like the IBIS, all stabilization is off. So if you want that natural handheld look that you were like kind of desiring, you're able to get it, not electronically in post, and the sensor can't physically move whatsoever. But then if you want IBIS, it's like a mechanism that will unlock in the camera, and then the camera is going to be able to have IBIS again. I think if they were able to create some technology or device like that, I think that could end up becoming like a huge game changer sort of in the industry, where it's like, oh, you want gimbal-like footage? Turn on this switch. You don't want that and you want a handheld? Turn on this. And it's kind of would be like that DJI cinema camera, but inside the camera itself instead.
Yeah, that's genius, bro.
It makes a lot of sense. And
where's my paycheck?
Exactly. It makes a lot of sense, and I that's definitely I think a really fantastic idea, because I know back in the GH4 days, like a lot of shows, like I know Breaking Bad, for example, used GH4s all the time for one, the flexible lens mount so they could adapt different stuff and the size, but when the GH5 came out, they kept using the GH4 because they would often rig it to like cars or do these point of view shots and things like that. And even with the internal stabilization turned off, if you strap a camera to a car, those vibrations are moving the sensor whether you like it or not. Even with IBIS turned on, IBIS turned off, that vibration, just the magnets or whatever that holds it in place, just do not like that. So that's the reason I keep a GH5S around specifically for that, is because if it's on a gimbal or it's mounted to a car or some other weird situation, and if you're on a bigger set where there's like a lot of different ways to stabilize the camera, that the sensor moving around is definitely like more of a liability than it's worth for some of those productions. And so I see why they released the no IBIS box camera versions, but if there was a way to lock it off, that is like one fix that could really open up the versatility of those cameras for sure.
Right. Or it's just a simple release to the box style and then release the S2H at the same time. And it's like, even if it was called like the I think that's also another recommendation is like release the S2H and it basically have all the exact same specs, but it has IBIS in the camera, and then release the S2HX, but it's a box style camera. I think if they did that with the S5 II and the S5 IIX, those would make the differences of the cameras, a night and day. One's a box style, no IBIS, has all the same specs. One is not box style, it's more fluid, the exact same specs, but it has IBIS.
Yeah, I think that's maybe more likely, but I love the locked off sensor idea. So, and since we're still on this sort of like, we've kind of moved on to our wish list, which was my next question. Is there any tiny wish list things from Panasonic, whether that's a camera or a feature in a camera or something you want fixed? Like, we've talked about the ND, we've talked about the locked off sensor, but is there anything else? And I feel like I know what you're going to say, Matthew. But is there anything else that you guys have in mind or that you would love to put in a camera in 2024? You don't have to mention the specific camera, but any wish list items that you would want.
Dude, my biggest one is, I already said it, it's an internal ND. That's basically the only thing that I need basically from day to day. So that's, if they could get that in there somehow, I'd be ecstatic, honestly.
Have you seen it's an L mount to PL mount with internal NDs inside the adapter?
No.
I've seen similar things, but I don't know if I've seen that exactly, but
yeah,
it makes sense it would have room.
Right.
Cool.
So I was on a video on Armando and I was talking to him about it, and it was like on the sensor or adapter itself, it had an internal ND built into the camera. I think that's something that you would like, but the downside is you would have to be on like the PL mount instead. So you would have to have PL lenses, obviously.
Got it.
But it's also like $600 for this adapter.
I was going to say, and PL lenses are not known for being super cheap either, so.
Yeah, there's the two downsides, but that would be nice.
Yeah.
I'll hit with my feature, and then you can go again, Cesar. You can go, Rhett. So I think the feature that you were kind of saying that I would probably predict, but it's that OpenGate 60 frames a second, even 48 frames a second in a 10-bit scenario. I think this is the one feature that most content creators and modern filmmakers of today kind of need, being able to record in that 3:2 aspect ratio and being able to crop for vertical in 9:16 or 16:9, but with a little bit more room to slow down. There's so many scenarios where I need 60 or 48 frames a second whenever I'm filming a project, but it has multiple deliverables, and that is when I want OpenGate 60 frames a second the most in the camera. So S2H, I think hopefully that camera, I've been bugging them so much about it too.
Hey, we'll all jump on it. I'll start writing some letters as well. Two last quick questions. We'll go lightning round because I have another call I have to get on. But do you guys see any like YouTube trends going forward into 2024 or have any predictions there? Or do you guys have any like personal goals in terms of YouTube content creation or your businesses going forward into 2024?
Cesar?
I think the trend that I've been seeing happening is people are becoming more authentic and vulnerable with their basically like day-to-day life. Like people show the back end of the creative kind of process, and people aren't, I don't know how to explain it. It's more authentic, and people are starting to really focus on storytelling, and that's super, super important. Like we do that as a living, we're telling people stories for their brands and people through documentaries and whatever we do. And seeing that shift in YouTube a bit is super super nice, especially because people get to show their creative skill through that end. So hopefully we see more of that this year. And I've been seeing a lot of younger creators, like I'm talking like 18-year-olds, telling some incredible visual stories about creating and products and everything, and the way they tell these stories, and like it's so much easy. It's a lot more digestible, I guess, instead of just, you know, being spoken to like, this is a cool lens, this is why you should need it, you know. And I like the creativity that's based around it now. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that throughout this year.
I feel like YouTube as a whole is just slowly switching and transitioning sort of away from the Mr. Beastification of YouTube and going into like what Cesar said of that storytelling and like that new wave, new generation, where it's more raw and a little bit more natural. I think YouTube as a whole just goes through lots of different waves of changes. I'm definitely in that education niche, and I feel like the educational niche, right now, it's needing more like practical and real life examples and situations, and not just like similar to what Cesar just said. It's not just saying this is this lens, this is what it looks like, this is what it does, and like here's everything you need to know. Like, not basically, in a sense, not just like this is why I recommend it, but like actual real life experiences that I think are going to be way more valuable and important coming in this next year.
No, for sure. And you know, I've been not making YouTube videos, but watching YouTube for a long time, and I remember it going from like the tutorial days, like everything was a tutorial back in the day, and if you upload a tutorial video now and call it that, it's probably gonna get like 10 views. And it went on to this like vlog kind of situation, and then on to mostly just like a lot more gear stuff as opposed to like the DIY stuff from back in the day, which was an interesting change. And I definitely see this more genuine sort of environment going forward, which is probably a good thing, because there's so much more like fake setup weird stuff happening on like TikTok and stuff, that I think that people are going to gravitate as like a response to that in the other direction for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's the time to grow on YouTube too, because a lot of the guys we watch, you know, like growing up or like over the years, are starting to take breaks, and they're actually, a lot of creators are quitting YouTube now. So I think that opens the door for the new next wave of people to come and fill those shoes and entertain and educate through that, you know what I mean? Like Matty Hopoyo's quitting. He's one of them. Big guy. I like how he tells stories and stuff, and there's a ton more. I've been seeing a lot of them trying to take breaks. They're like burnt out. Maybe they're on to the next thing. So I think the time is now if you want to be someone in the space. So.
And then outside of YouTube and, well, maybe not completely outside, but in addition to, in the videography, photography, Instagram, whatever it is, do you see any video or photo trends that are popping up that people should keep an eye on, or things you guys want to try to do or improve on in the next year? Anything along those lines?
I feel like for myself, I want to start making more short form reels. I absolutely hate making short form content with like a burning passion, just because of how much time it takes to make a video and then the effort and output you need to make. But I feel like just in general, I don't really necessarily see too many trends, just because I'm not on the platforms a ton in themselves. But I feel like just consistently posting on like a social and like making your feed look good is going to be the best way to grow, you know, on Instagram and YouTube, even though I have plenty of hot takes on why you shouldn't post shorts on YouTube, just because it can like dilute your subscriber numbers and different things like that. But for at least on Instagram, I feel like posting shorts is definitely, at least for myself, the thing I'm planning to do more this year.
Yeah. I think the trend I've seen a lot through short form content, hot take, I'm not a big fan about with short form either. Like me and Matthew actually had this talk like a couple weeks ago, and I think people on YouTube are more invested in you, and you is like your whole entire story, basically. Like, if someone's gonna go click a YouTube video and watch that and sit there for 3, 5, 10, 20 minutes, they actually are more invested, you know, versus short form. It's just people are just mindlessly scrolling, looking for that quick answer, you know what I mean? And I think it's easy to just disappear on Instagram and TikTok. But what I've noticed on both those platforms is, especially TikTok, is authenticity. Like, people, they're not looking for that super pretty polished kind of stuff. They're looking for more authenticity. Like, oh, okay, like, this is what I shot, and this is kind of the back end story of it. And something that I've noticed that works very well there is if you have like phone footage, so it feels made at home, and then you have the second half be like the clean stuff, right? Like your camera stuff, so you see a payoff, and that actually works a lot. And I actually have a friend, her name is, if you're gonna shout her out real quick, her name's Jasmine Quinones, Jasmine Q on Instagram, and she makes basically short films on Instagram, and it's something you wouldn't expect to work, but the topics that she covers of like burnout and being a new year and I still feel the same, I'm still depressed, and all this stuff, it works. It's through that creative medium. So I think people get hung up on, oh, we have to shoot vertical, but sometimes horizontal and it works. As long as there's substance and something you're trying to convey there. So authenticity, I think, is the main thing we should see. We're going to see being pushed more on TikTok and Instagram. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like with what you said, Cesar, I feel like the 1.1 ads, like, at least for myself, like something I noticed in this last year, it's like if you want to grow a business on YouTube, or like you want to grow like a creative business, YouTube just has more loyalty and more loyal fans. Like, I did an affiliate program and I got a 10% cut, and I did it for 5 months and made $1,200. Not a crazy amount of money, but that means he made 90%. So he made obviously whatever $12,000 minus $1,200 is. So it's like this guy made just a ton of money from an affiliate program for myself. And that's like something that I'm learning this year. It's like, what value can you bring to your audience that will provide them and make their lives easier, and what product can you provide them? And that's like something that like I'm learning and utilizing this year, is creating more digital assets that like provide a high value in return for people that are interested in it.
Yeah, I agree. Like Rhett said earlier, you know how he said if you make like a YouTube video now and it's a tutorial, like nobody's gonna click that, right? I think that's something that is happening on short form platforms as well. Like, every video I scroll through, like, yeah, I get whatever, but then it's like best settings to get the most cinematic video, or do this, or 3 tips, and it's always the same things. There's only a certain amount of things that you're going to be able to teach people, you know? And I feel like people are going to get, that's just too diluted now, and everybody has an individual story, so that's why I push authenticity. Like, the best thing you can do is push your own story, you know what I mean? Because I'm not Matthew, and I haven't felt what he's felt. I haven't done what he's done, you know what I mean? And that's unique to you, and that's what makes everybody entertaining and enjoyable, you know what I mean? Because I feel like you could resonate with that. At least me. Like, I love to hear other people's stories, because it's like having a book in a person form, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And even if you are doing something that is kind of a tutorial or reviewing something, like, you're trying to bring your perspective is why people would click on it, you know? Especially if it's like a new lens or something and a dozen people have it. It's like people might watch the first 2 videos, you know, just based on like a search, but when they get into the deep like levels, like what about what you do and your experience you can bring to put a different perspective on whatever you're talking about is something that I think people should go out of the way to do in your own style. And that's something I always try to do, is like does this video exist yet? If it doesn't, I try to make it, or I want to make it, and just bring that new solution for a problem people might having, or answer a question people might be having, or put my own unique spin on something. You know, like if I'm gonna do a long-term GH6 review at this point, like this is a very long-term review, and there's a lot of those out there. What can I do to go the extra mile, or bring a new perspective to it, or do it in a way that is like reflective of me? And at this point, like I think that is, in terms of just how YouTube and social media is going, and in terms of just like how that video would do well at this stage, is I think what you need to do. And I think taking that lesson to everything is important, because that's what people connect to, and that's what people stick around and come back for, you know?
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, thanks again, guys, for stopping by. This was, the retrospective on 2023, and in the part 2, we're going to talk with Emily from Micro Four Thirds and Sebastian from Red Frame, and we are going to talk about 2024 and how Lumix is going to move forward. Even though we talked a little bit about that already here, but what are these topics? We're just going for it. So, thanks for stopping by, guys, and we'll see you in part 2.